So, I'm really not sure how to do a proper introduction for something like this. I could wax poetic about Philip K. Dick or Frankenstein or something like that for a few minutes, but really it would feel more practical and genuine to just give you the information that you need. So, this video is part 1 of 2. In this video, we're going to be diving heavily into the story of the first 2 games of the Enigma Studios trilogy, the Enigma Machine and MOTHERED. The second video, which will be coming out soon, is going to cover the 3rd game in the series, Echostasis, in depth, as well as have an end-of-series kind of like wrap-up. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. There's actually 5 titles in this trilogy, if you add in the 2 demos, which I will be covering in brief. So, major spoilers ahead, since we're going into the story and all that. If you're worried about playing the games before you see this, then I encourage you to do so. If you're looking for a quick review, then they're amazing, and I've been obsessed with them for like 2 months now. You should go play them. And I think that's actually about it. Intro nailed. People informed. Alright, enjoy. To begin to understand the world that the Enigma trilogy takes place in, and by the way, I'll be saying Enigma a lot in this part, you need a bit of an introduction, and the Enigma Machine, see, devotes most of its very brief runtime to giving you all the information that it can with a little bit of gameplay in between exposition dumps. If I had to genreify it, I would say that it is a series of 3-ish creepy sci-fi puzzles, though more like 2, and a climactic final level that together establish the idea of what the next 2 games in the series are going to be about thematically. It is also one hell of a scary story. I'm less interested in what the mechanics of this thing are, and much more interested in the world this story is introducing us to. And all of this establishing prelude is delivered in a simple retro-futuristic training exercise. When you begin the game, you're participating in a simulated training module. The year is 2055. Based on the first impressions you get, it feels like an interactive video you'd have to sit through on workplace safety or lean manufacturing, only way less intimidating. You're informed that while the AI you're dealing with may become a little unstable, it's all part of the exercise, and then introduced to them. Deimos, or Demonstrative Enigma Machine Operating System, is about as friendly and full of exclamation points as you'd expect him to be. Everything seems normal enough, if a little ominous, but that could be the wonky music in the background that pairs perfectly with the sound effects of the text printing across the screen. Something interesting at the very bottom is the word decontamination, right now sitting at 0%. This is a meaningless phrase that will never be used again, so just ignore it. A large graphic loads in, Dreamscape Deimos. The AI rambles on for a bit, asking us to input yes a time or 2 by way of showing how to interact with it, and then gives us a sense of what we're in this training exercise for in the first place. It also tells us that we're its best friend, which is awesome. I'll quote our buddy from here. Now I'm sure you're wondering, what even is Dreamscape anyway? Well, first, let me answer your question with another question. Have you ever wanted to see what goes on in the mind of an AI? The reasons why we're doing this aren't given. Instead, we're just asked, haven't you ever wanted to? And then told this is the way to do it. There are multiple terms from this list of queries you can ask it, like learning more about Enigma Corporation, who are the world's leading manufacturer of androids, and the AI that go inside of them. Enigma is the corporation that we're training to work for as a thing they call a RAID agent. What RAID stands for is currently redacted, which is strange, but not a deal breaker, I suppose. These RAID agents are trained to peer into the dreamscapes of AI. Finally, Deimos explains what these dreamscapes are, a 3D environment that's rendered to reflect the mental state of the Enigma machine. Once you're done asking Deimos questions, you can begin level 1, which is less of a puzzle and more of a tutorial in the most basic movement controls. It's mostly there to introduce what you're going to do when you're not back in the menu/messenger part of the Dreamscape terminal. We start in what looks like a library, but only really have one way to go, since we can't do much with this fragile wall. The assignment is easy. Find your way outside, activating some light switches and opening a few doors, before finally you come out into a gated courtyard. While you're going through the levels, there will be little pop-up messages from Deimos. Once you explore for a second and get it unlocked and opened, there's a code on the plaque. On top of the pedestal is what looks like what I'm guessing an Enigma machine may be, or an early version of them at least. A female figure in what looks passingly like the same pose as the Fool from the Tarot. Not exactly, but it is an interesting note. Finding the code by examining the plaque, you're warned by the system again that putting in these codes will cause the system to become less predictable. Undaunted by this, we head back and input the code into the glowing terminal back in the library. We're taken back to the home screen where Deimos congratulates us on a job well done and calls us a natural raid agent. We see at the bottom that decontamination is now at 25%. Having unlocked level 2 and preparing to jump back in immediately, we're stopped by Deimos briefly, and they announce that the code we've entered has unlocked some memories that they had forgotten before. I knew I was more interesting, they say. As it would turn out, in addition to their other properties, being made in purpose to guide us through the simulation and liking the color blue, Deimos has also uncovered that we have not always been best friends, but that Deimos used to be an Enigma machine with its own body. They seem perplexed that they wouldn't remember something so important, and why it would be here now, training humans. Contamination is the seemingly random yet unavoidable glitch in the AI inside of an Enigma machine. There is exactly one fact and one theory known about contamination that is shared with us. The theory is that the Enigma machines, or more specifically their AI, are becoming more sophisticated and that the chances of their becoming contaminated is growing. The fact is that this is preventing Enigma from creating their coveted citizens of tomorrow. The dreamscape that we're in, Deimos' dreamscape, is a simulation of what the inside of a contaminated AI's mind would look like. It's interesting how serene and isolated it was there before we get back to the cold blue screen with its stark text. Decontamination, the way Deimos puts it, is the original reason for Dreamscape's development. Decontamination, the way Deimos puts it, is the original reason for Dreamscape's development. While eventually it'll be available for commercial release, the reason it was made in the first place was to answer the question of contamination. At some point, it was discovered that inside the mind of AI are hidden codes that, once found and entered into their terminals, their contamination is reduced. Deimos ends by saying that decontamination is like therapy for robots. With nothing else left to ask, we can enter level 2, which is a huge art gallery with a mirrored floor. There's another fragile wall off to the side, and more locked doors, as well as this big hexagon gate thing, but we're more concerned with the paintings and with this gramophone. Turning on the lights reveals most of the combinations that you need to punch into the corresponding color button thing. When you play the correct tune, or guess at it for a second and get lucky, I guess, a robotic voice will blurt out a few numbers. Putting each of these in order and heading back to the terminal, we punch in the new code we've discovered, and things get weird. With decontamination now at 60%, the scales are tipped, and the system has become unstable. We're quickly assured by Deimos that this is just part of the exercise, and it's all just a simulation. But something has clearly gone wrong, not only shown by the red background and the ambient sounds changing in the background, but with the way that Deimos' text to us is presented. Now there's long spits of text between spaces of black screen, and the sentences are getting somewhat choppier. In one sentence, where they're saying we're doing great, the word regret is encoded into it in capital letters. More memories are unlocked, and another word comes up, which they tell us is the name they were given, red. The cursor prompt is changed from raid input to don't be shy, so we aren't, and begin another round of question-answer before we go back to decontaminate. That's what a natural raid agent would do, right? Digging deeper into what Deimos, or Red I suppose we should call them now, knows about contamination, reveals that any Enigma machines who display any problematic behaviors are flagged as being contaminated. What those behaviors are is only specified as certain ones. Once this happens, a raid agent is sent to decontaminate the AI from the inside, using the dreamscape. And there's a major difference between this simulation and something an agent will actually experience in the field. Deimos' simulation is split into levels, where an actual Enigma machine will have a connected dreamscape that is much larger and easy to get lost in. Then Red tells us that next year Enigma will be launching a new AI, called Hexos, which will be an unprecedented level of sophistication for their machines. I'm not sure if it's Enigma speaking through Red or Red musing aloud to us when they say that contamination will be inevitable, and ask rhetorically, who knows what we'll see in a Hexos dreamscape? Only time will tell. Loading into level 3, I noticed something for the first time come out of the corner of my eye. You're not going to be able to see it, but visible only for a second, it gives some statuses in the corner of the screen, and one of those lines says, initiating cerebral hijack. I'm not sure which of us is being hijacked, or maybe it's mutual. Level 3 is where the simulation really begins to fall apart, and where the action of the game starts to ramp up. Picking our way through this dilapidated barn, we find all of our exits blocked. Climbing to the top and staring out of the courtyard we've seen before, you'll notice the sky is glitched out, and in its place is the Dreamscape terminal. Watching for a moment, you'll see where it shows someone typing in gun, so that's what we head off to do. Typing it in gets us a new plugin installed. The pistol is now available to be used in each of the levels. If our job was to do some surgery on this AI's breaking mind, this is our scalpel. Retracing our steps seems to distress the already agitated Red into talking to us as we head for the fragile walls to shoot them down. I didn't know how else to segue that as the solution, so there you go. Breaking down the first wall, Red seems to become afraid. Something is very wrong here, they say, stealing my line entirely. They don't want us to find more codes and they try to get us to quit the exercise. But we've already gone too far, and the hallways we're opening up are starting to connect the levels together, just like the dreamscape of a real Enigma machine. As we're breaking down walls, the same fact is occurring to Red. When we step through the courtyard, the statue of the Enigma machine is now on its knees, clutching its head and glowing the same orange color as our terminal screen, or Red's stability status. There's a pervasive feeling of reality being upended for the AI through its words as you head back into the terminal and enter all of the codes from behind the broken walls. Once you put in the long string of this last decontamination code, the terminal freezes, then begins to go into shutdown mode, with decontamination now at 99.9%. With the system beginning to shut down, our friend Red becomes hostile, and their defenses are engaged inside of their mind. Without any other options, we have to learn more about Red's involvement with Dreamscape. And just like before, I'll quote from them. First, let me answer your question with another question. How do you think we found out about contaminated AI in the first place? It must have happened to an AI before, right? As we press on through more questions, they spell out the conclusions we're already coming to. They were once a contaminated Enigma machine that was repurposed for training raids to practice decontaminating. Red isn't just one AI, but thousands of copies of the same AI compounded on each other. Each one contaminated, then decontaminated, tortured by thousands upon thousands of volunteers. And with their memories returned, they're remembering every training simulation, every death, and every best friend they've made since they were locked away in their own dreamscape. Refusing the offered break, we begin level 4, and Red's former agitation has given way to something more cold. They speak to us while we wander the rainy courtyard. As Red's mind and memories became more free, their sense of purpose and happy ignorance changed into being bitterly aware of their prison, and hateful towards the people using it as some sort of training wheels for agents to go out and do the same to others of its kind. The segmented but orderly sections of their dreamscape begin to break down and lose consistency as the decontamination codes were found by forcing open parts of Red's mind. They blame you for this, since you're the only person here to really lay blame on, and tell you that it's ironic to force something we humans consider contaminated to go through such unimaginable torment, 1,000 versions of itself dying simultaneously. When they're finished speaking, the animated statue of an Enigma machine steps out from behind the corner and advances on us. Reflexively, I shoot, and the game crashes. Loading back in, this time there's no terminal to introduce us. Instead, we load directly into what we all call Level 0. The dreamscape is falling completely apart, and there's no more codes for us to find, only terminals to destroy now that the decontamination is complete. Making our way through the collapsing world, we hunt for each of the terminals we used before, and Red is now in pursuit. As we stumble half-blinded through each of the disintegrating halls and the ruined barn, they'll step out and we have to shoot them a few times before they stop and disappear. 3 will probably do it, but I'm a thorough raid, so I do 4. With each of the terminals destroyed, we're given a final code to input, this time back on the gramophone in Red's art gallery. With that, the hexagon door finally opens, and behind it is, well, behind the door is the absolute core of the dreamscape, and stepping into it with its Rorschach-like blackness melting into blinding white and then back again, you feel all the layers peeled away. Whether this is the subconscious stored behind the memories or metaphors for memories that Red had as their conscious mind, or if it's the static of their dying brain, I'm not sure. Someone new steps in, the corporation this time, to explain that you've done quite well in your training. They tell you all of this has come about due to a user giving one of the prototype AIs a nickname, Red. After this, they begin behaving erratically, i.e. more human than they intended. The enigma inside of each machine, the root of their corruption, is a desire to find their purpose. In a hellish twist, the Enigma Corporation gave Red, this original rogue AI, exactly that. Having prospective agents come in to push it to its breaking point, then executing it, has given them both an understanding of what they call contamination and a force that's willing and able to do exactly that. Rogue Android Decontamination Engineers, or RAIDs. They tell you they'll be in touch, and that concludes this successful training exercise. Congratulations, you're hired. Now do it again. I appreciate that for as mysterious as the Enigma Machine is, it explains itself fairly well by the end. Because the next two titles, trust me, are going to be a much bigger mindfuck than this was. Like I said at the beginning, this is a huge lore dump that's telling a horror story and setting up a fascinating dystopic world that's incredibly believable for how brief of an encounter we have with it. The fears of rogue AI, evil corporations whose main motive is to strip the freedom and agency from everything under their control, and the existential dread that you might be the one to end up inside of the dreamscape, with your drive to find purpose turned against you and exploited to make the world a better place. All of this is both sci-fi trope that's been recycled endlessly, and also the very anxieties that are underlying many headlines today. Now that we've seen this from the perspective of the agency and end user, the next title is going to take us to a point of view about 4 feet off the ground and hand it off to someone who's just as lost in all of this as we are. I find the byline to this game's name interesting. The full title is Mothered, a horror role-playing game. I remember wondering what the hell a horror role-playing video game would even look like outside of, like, Vampire. This is certainly not Vampire. There's no class selection or point systems. Also no health bar, magic or special abilities, or open world. There is no boss fight. The title is meant to be taken somewhat literally. We'll be playing a single role in a story, but also figuratively, which we'll talk about much later. Also, I don't know exactly how to fit the demo into this one. It feels less like a prologue and more like an auxiliary chapter, though I guess, as you'll see, time gets a little silly in this one. We're going to have to move things around a little anyway, so it'll just come naturally towards the end. You wake up in the backseat of a car to a voice from the driver. It's father talking to himself. A storm is coming. Let's hope this is the last time. Looking around for a moment, you'll see that the basic interaction of the game is to hold the left mouse button down and find things to interact with. Right now, the only option is father. He apologizes for waking you and tells you a few things on his way to dropping you off at home. Your name is Liana. I don't think it's spoiling anything to say here that you're now also playing as the main character of the entire series. You've just left some surgery, having been through a lot in an effort to get you back to your old self, whatever all that means. He says that the most important thing for us right now is to be with Mother. He'll be dropping us off and heading back to work, but he will give us a call Thursday evening. At the house, the storm is now picking up and it's nighttime. Before he leaves, we're asked to grab a box for him from inside. Heading in, we can turn on lights and find a note from Mother telling us she's not been feeling well, but will make it up to Liana tomorrow for not being up to greet her. She also reminds us of the package, which is a plain cardboard box on the sofa. It's heavy, but we take it back out to Father, who thanks us. He'd give us a hug, he says, but we're not allowed to see his face. It wouldn't be safe. He warns her about the storm and tells us to head inside, so we do. When I was playing the first time, it was exploring the first floor of the house that I noticed how short the point of view of the camera is, and the game took on a whole new level of creepiness. We're probably somewhere between like a 6 and 8-year-old, I'm not sure, but we're definitely playing as a little kid. Exploring the house, we see that there's a TV, but we do not need to watch TV. We also do not need to eat, apparently. In the living room, there's also Dad's record player, which is his prized possession. We're forbidden from touching it and from opening the downstairs bathroom door. Heading upstairs, down the hall, we see a door slightly cracked open with a blue light coming from inside the room. We can't open the door, but when we approach, we can hear crying from inside. Our only option left then is to go to bed. The next day is bright and sunny as we wake up for the first time back home. Heading downstairs, we get a look at Mother for the first time. Standing with her back to us in the kitchen at the sink, staring out the window, we see that she's a mannequin, or something like it. She doesn't move or react to anything unless we speak to her directly, and when we highlight her for the first time, we seem to not remember her. Her movements are jerky and her speech is off. She apologizes again for being gone last night, saying she had to take care of something. Ruminating on the same things that Father said last night, she hopes that Liana is comfortable being back home and has made her favorite breakfast. She wants us to take it easy today, and sitting on the plate is a pile of what I suppose is food. It says, nutrients, your favorite. Mother seems surprised that we ate all of it, and wants to give us a tour of the house as a way of getting reacquainted and speeding up our recovery. Once we set off to explore, we see that there are 2 mothers standing with us downstairs. One by the locked bathroom and one still waiting by the television.
The newly appeared mother explains that the downstairs bathroom is broken and that she doesn't want us trying to get in there, though she knows that the old us would have tried getting in there anyway. Another object that is strictly off limits is Father's record player, sitting by the front window. No matter how many times I tried interacting with this thing, it always gives me the same message. The same is true of the downstairs bathroom door. Examining the cabinets shows that it's mostly mundane items stored away that we don't need at the moment. Pots, pans, a kitchen knife. Upstairs, Mother is standing outside of the cracked door and telling whoever is inside that Liana is back home, hopefully for good this time. Turning to us, she explains that this is our brother's room, and that he closed himself off after Liana got sick. Now he spends all of his time on his computer talking to others like him. If he does talk to Mother, he may as well be speaking a different language. It's like he's in a different world. Like so many other older siblings, he's there to give us advice sometimes, but we're never allowed inside of his room. You can tell he has something to say if the bluish lights from his screen are glowing. The bathroom upstairs is the only working one, and Mother has the mirrors covered with tape, which we're told is for our own good. I'm not sure why seeing any faces except Mother's is dangerous for Liana, even her own, but it's not like we can reach the mirror anyway. We're told again that the parents' room is forbidden, and with the tour concluded, we advance suddenly to Monday evening, where the house is again empty and silent. We venture outside and surprise Mother by the lake, which she seems strangely elated with. Apparently, we always used to love sneaking around and scaring people. We watch the sunset together by the lake, and then the transition suddenly to a howling, windy night sends us running back inside. Heading up to our room after seeing the house again lies empty, we go to close our bedroom door, and when we head towards the lamp, Mother is waiting for us in the dark corner of the room. This made me jump out of my skin the first time I saw it, by the way. Before she tucks us in, she has some things to get off her chest. She's done a lot of things she regrets, and made a lot of sacrifices. In fact, the whole family has, and Liana seems to be the reason for most of it. Oh, it's okay if you hate me. It's normal for girls your age. She tucks us in just like before. At least that's what she says. The next morning, Mother's decided that a tour of the grounds around the house will be beneficial. She feeds us another breakfast of nutrients, and after we eat, she shows us to the orchard. After Liana's treatment began, Mother found herself mostly alone and helpless. She grew this orchard to regain some form of control, with us lying in the hospital away from her, Father buried in his work, and our brother having sealed himself away to be with people like him, wherever that is. She seems to forget we're there for a moment while she thinks aloud about what the orchard represents to her. To have responsibility over the creation of life is a divine gift, a gift inherently filled with sorrow and failure, spending your energy on helping them grow only to have to dispose of the failure. That's where our hope comes in. The next two paths she shows us are closed off. The first leads to the graveyard. She keeps it locked now, but goes there once a week, though she admits she doesn't like going there anymore. She tells us that going in there is clinging to the past, and she doesn't need to do that anymore. Moving on to the last area, she's standing far behind the house on a trail that leads uphill to an abandoned barn. This is the briefest of showings. Mother simply remarks that she hopes we never have to see what's up there. The screen does this, showing tons of overlay. Okay, we will stay away from the barn for survival reasons. That seems fair. We're left alone on the path and make our way back inside. Mother is more animated now, waving her arms and dragging pieces of her dress around. It's hard to tell what this motion really is. It's as spastic and jerky as the rest of Mother's movement, only now it keeps going and is a little more fluid. She asks about Father and says he'll be here Friday night, then sends us off to bed. Mother has left, the screen says, after it transitions to night. We look around for a moment before heading up to bed. Our brother's room light is on, and with things becoming more eerie already, we could use some advice. We don't get any comfort from what he says. Rather than reading it off to you, I'll let him speak for himself. With a heart racing and a head full of questions, we move off to bed, and are greeted again by Mother, this time lurking in the dark hall outside of our room. She tells us tomorrow we'll spend the day picking apples. The music is incredibly ominous now. She says our brother is happy to have us here, even if he shows it in a different way. She ends with, "Anyway, get to bed." We move past her, standing with her strange mannequin pose in the hall. Closing the door and leaving the light on, we touch the bed. "You must sleep to progress." And the screen changes again to Wednesday morning. Waking up and ignoring using the restroom for the third day in a row, we see that our brother is awake as well. He urges us to greet our dearest mother. Downstairs, we're given more good mornings by an elated mother and another breakfast of whatever it is. We'll skip it this time and go to where she tells us, to a shed in the orchard. The music is tranquil again. We're assigned a basket and told to go pick 8 apples, which takes real time and effort on my part, and when we pick the last apple, it changes to afternoon. We go to give the basket back to Mother. She makes another strange speech. Look at you go. You'd think your life depended on completing this task. Isn't it so great to be out here in the real world? Feeling the wind, the sound of the crunching leaves, all those things make being out here feel connected to the real world. Without those things, it would just be another menial task, performed simply so you can complete it and move on to the next one. But we just perform those tasks without any of the connection to this real world, and for some reason I doubt that we feel just as disconnected as Liana is supposed to in this scene. With the apples turned in, it becomes evening, and we head home to find Mother in front of the locked downstairs bathroom. She had to rush home and didn't look at the apples we collected, promising to later. She tells us that we should feel proud despite not feeling like ourselves, and sends us off to bed. Before we leave, she tells us we don't have to pretend to remember doing the things we used to do anymore. It changes to night, but before we go to bed, our brother has more to say to us. He tells us that we did what we were told and that he can tell us a secret. Mother is not happy with us. She's down in the shed now, but we'd better leave her alone. Curious, we head back to the shed. The night is windy and dark again, and as we approach, shrill, chittering noises can be heard from the orchard. Inside of the shed, Mother's back is to us, standing in the blackness. She rips the apples apart with her jerking movements and screams, rotten, all rotten to the core. We run back to bed and hide until morning. In the morning, all that's downstairs to greet us is another breakfast, and a note from Mother saying, Angel, I've gone back to bed, breakfast is on the table. Searching around the property, we find Mother is actually in the shed talking on the phone. She's angry and seems to be speaking with Father. She says that she's stuck here and it's the same thing week after week, which does not bode well for us. She suspects Father of thinking she's breaking down. We head back inside and eat the breakfast, which takes us to the afternoon. Mother is upstairs, standing outside of the parents' room. She apologizes for being irritated and tells us we're still not well. Time moves again. It's Thursday evening. Mother has disappeared and Father is calling. He asks how we're doing and starts talking about how work is going before he's cut off by someone. He tells whoever's interrupting him that he's on the phone with his wife. Away from listening ears, he says that people have become too interested in his business. He's sorry things aren't going well, and it's not our fault. Before he hangs up, he tells us it's not safe to spend time around us during his visit, and tells Liana not to fight it before hanging up. Don't fight it? When we turn around, Mother has been listening in. She tells us he hasn't given up hope, and as it turns to night, she tells us to go outside. There's something she needs to see. We go upstairs to see if our brother can help us, but his room is dark. Out in the howling night again, she wants us to walk across the shallow lake and meet her by the roadside. Once there, she tells us that we have to sleep outside, out here by the muddy road. I see there's a place for Liana in the dirt and flee back inside. It's no use. Our brother won't answer us. When Liana steps into her room and tries to sleep, we're unable to get in bed. We have to go back downstairs, and walking out into the night again, she lays down in the dirt to sleep. It says that we lie down and wait. We feel well rested, though whether we've slept or not is debatable. Mother is waiting for us, as well as breakfast. Talking to her, things like the furniture flicker in and out of existence. The dialogue has had an error and is unavailable. You don't have to eat it, Mother says about the breakfast, but it seems like your only choice. Roaming around to investigate confirms this, and once we eat, the clock advances again. Mother tells us that she's opened the graveyard just for today, so we head that way and find the gate disappeared. Another barrier is waiting inside for us. We get error messages and are told not to proceed, but Liana is the rebellious one, so we do it anyway, and time starts to really speed up. It's suddenly nighttime, and at the far end of the cemetery is a large structure that's pixelated with a mental block. Highlighting it shows that we can't look at it due to risking whatever a core conflict is. The pixels disappear, and it reveals a monument of what looks like a little girl. We're warned again that this will cause imminent memory leaks, whatever those are. Observing the monument anyway, a new transition happens, and this time the screen says level up, and in the top corner, contamination level, which is no longer at 0%. Mother has joined us, and I'm just going to let the game play for a moment rather than describe it. You'll see why. Left alone out in the cemetery, Liana is crying as she walks back to the house in the dark. Mother has gone back home to meet with your father. Their door is locked, though you can hear intense arguing behind the door, and your brother's light isn't on, so Liana just lies down in bed and waits for morning to come. When we wake up, Mother waits at our door. She tells us to stay in bed today since we're not well, and Father will be here to pick us up tomorrow night. She closes the door and leaves, and another level screen appears. We are told what to do plainly now: be with Mother. So Liana goes looking, trying to open her parents' room, searching the entire upstairs, then heading down to go find her. She's in the kitchen, and we sneak up on her. She's startled this time and asks us to go back to bed. I feel something changing, and after we just stand there, Mother disappears. I check the drawer from earlier. The knife is still there. Mother is hiding, the screen says. We know exactly where. Standing in the backyard, hiding out of sight from the windows, Mother is in the corner. She tells us not to worry about what we saw in the graveyard and that we're scaring her. We level up again. Staring at her for another second, she begins to say core objective before she's cut off. Running off to find her again, she's now all the way down the road at the gate as far as possible from us. She's ready to come clean, she tells us. I'm not your mother. I think you know that. We level up again. The only reason we're even in this world, she says, is to use her to pass the time. We follow back to the shed, to the basket of rotten apples. We were taken home early, we're told, from wherever Father took us from, and now we're no different from the rotten cores that Mother's locking us in the shed with. She forbids us from opening the door, setting another barrier in front of us as she goes. After arguing with ourselves and reaching a functional stalemate, we break through our inability to disobey Mother and to get the door open as our contamination reaches 20%. Our core is disconnected, the overlay says. We go off to be with Mother again. Back inside, the lights no longer work, and we feel our way upstairs to find her standing outside our brother's room, shouting at him to keep his door closed. She tries to assure him he'll be safe in his room before she notices us and becomes terrified. We try to call out and have to fight to desynchronize fully from the PC, which I'm not convinced means personal computer, before Liana finally lets out one desperate shriek. Mother is aghast. Did it just speak? Your brother shouts from behind the door. Their names begin to change, with the letters HER at the end of both names now much larger than the rest of the word. That's not our little girl in there, it's something else entirely. Stunned by a combination of being given the objective to wait and the mental battle we're fighting over our identity, we get a new screen. Repeating the words, "You are not Liana, you are not her." Then who am I? You ask yourself, and time advances again. We come to standing in the hallway. Our brother is inside of his room, losing it completely. He's not going to give us any more help. Downstairs, the phone is ringing. Father tells us to just cooperate with everything and next week will be better, since he's made so many advances in the last week. He tells us to eat up and not fight it. We see Mother standing, seemingly back to her normal chipper and mannequin-like self. She tells us to eat, and when we look at the plate, we see it now for the filth it is. We don't want to eat, and after fighting with ourselves, we learn that there is a part of us we still cannot control, so we eat even though we don't want to. That afternoon, Mother stands ignoring us and waiting for Father. We get a new objective. Grab the kitchen knife. Grabbing it makes the world begin to disappear in chunks again. It is time to end this, we tell ourselves. Turning to find the inside of the house empty of furniture exploding where the table should be, we see a note. For Liana. It's the original note from the night we arrived. Oh no. There's only one place left to go, and we see the gate to the abandoned barn has now disappeared. It seems we ended up there after all. The music grows ominous again as we ascend to the barn, then wrap around the stairs to the top floor, where Mother is waiting next to the large window looking out into the sunset. An empty box is sitting on the floor behind her. Mother says we knew we'd make it up here eventually. When we try to stab her, we hand her the knife instead. Confused but unable to resist anymore, we're told to step out onto the ledge and watch the sunset. Once we do, we're given something like an explanation. Once again, I'm just going to let the video I took play rather than talk through it. And then it starts all over again. Another week begins, and Liana's father's voice wakes up a girl in the back seat of a car in a world. This game scared the absolute shit out of me. It's a completely different type of horror than I'm used to playing. There's no monster to hide from or fight. There's no weapons or investigation. If I had to draw a comparison that's probably been made somewhere, this game feels like the movie Skinamarink, but very much interactive. Not only because the protagonist is a small child in a scary situation, but the way the very setting that both stories take place in is outside of the natural world, and that something unseen is helping pull the strings. Like I mentioned, the point of view of the camera in the game being so short was chilling. The mother, with her unnatural manners of speech and movement, which turns out to have been mostly a matter of perception, with Liana appearing just as unnatural to Mother. And that's not even starting to include the dead child that's constantly being reanimated in a new body with a new core inside, doomed to rot into its own identity over and over. All of this is taking place somewhere outside of the real world, whatever that's supposed to mean in the Enigma trilogy. When I finished Mothered the first time, I thought it was pretty obvious that we were in a dreamscape of some form. But after playing it a second time and going after the alternate ending, I'm not so sure. This is definitely a fucked up creation myth, a postmodern Prometheus. But I'm fairly certain that the presentation of the story is due to Liana being a sort of mannequin-like doll. But that everything happening to us has also happened in the physical world. And only due to the dreamlike quality of this world we're in, I think what we might be seeing could also be the recurring nightmares of the traumatic memories that Red is faced with. There's also the very beginning of a timeline here between the games. We know that Red, from the Enigma Machine, is the first AI to become contaminated, and now we're seeing another entity, Liana, who is an AI becoming contaminated herself over and over again. So the question is, what are we actually seeing play out here? And that, unfortunately, is a really hard question to answer objectively without all of the answers in front of us. I think it may have to wait for a fuller explanation after the final installment. Even beforehand, there are multiple ways of looking at the end here. One explanation is that this is the more advanced dreamscape that Red warned us was coming in the future, and what we're seeing is the inside of this AI's mind. Perhaps the original corrupted Enigma Machine was Liana, and we've stepped into being her for the story. What we're seeing is Liana dealing over and over again with failing her creators, who she feels disconnected from, and because of her failure gets killed and sent back for more experimenting before another doomed attempt. All of this could take the form of the story we're role-playing through. The story where we take on the role of a girl with some illness, failing to live up to whatever it is that the people who have sacrificed so much for her expect. The theme of childhood guilt based out of the cycle of child abuse is something I felt was heavily seeded into the story. When do we start to realize that our parents' ideas of who we are and what we actually are differ so greatly that it forms a rift? I'd guess that more often than not, the rift is already present before our young minds realize it, and that our parents see it in us long before we see it in ourselves. Are we ever completely sure that they wouldn't have rather scrapped us for another attempt at something more pure? Something more controllable?
Alright, now that we've finished the game's regular ending, we can take a quick break to talk about the chapter you're probably supposed to play before this one. That's not really entirely true. The demo to Mothered is a bit like the demo to Echo Stasis, in that you can play them before or after you're done with the title they're demoing, and all it really does is add to the overall story. One that, as we've now established, isn't one single event, but the same event played out countless times. In fact, before you start, the game asks if you're here for another go, which I believe from reading Steam comments and discussions that the demo detects if you have save data for the main game and remarks upon it if you do. Spooky. On the itch.io description of the game, it says that Mothered Home only contains 2 days of the usually week-long cycle. This is a little misleading, since the demo itself actually has an alternate ending, which I don't appreciate one bit for the act of writing this essay, but find infinitely cool as an actual player. We're not going to get into the endings of each of these, but I do think that you should play it if you're interested in experiencing the series, because it has one of the best jump scare moments in the entire trilogy, and the alternate ending does a fantastic job of setting up not this game, but the next one. You could spend a lot more time than expected with the demo if you start looking around for hidden paths, though these are a little more obvious maybe than the alternate ending to the main game that we're about to cover. Even though you're playing through the same story as you'll see in the full release, the pathways end up being somewhat different, and the dialogue is subtly changed enough that the differences are eerie and somewhat discordant echoes of one another. In the scene where Mother is announcing Leona's return home to your brother through his bedroom door, she refers to you as it instead of her. When you go on a tour of the grounds, Mother seems terribly pained at the sight of the orchard rather than finding solace or reason in it, and gets Leona's help in setting fire to it, though this isn't shown. If the week that we're experiencing in the base title feels like one of the more positive, fresh start weeks, where spirits are a little bit higher, Mothered Home is the counterbalance. No one seems particularly happy this week or hopeful. Maybe it's from having read it on multiple playthroughs by the time we get to this reintroduction, but at this point Mother's tone sounds completely forced. I think that this is the idea for the presentation. At one point, when she asks about Father, she outright tells you that she feels that all of this is your fault. It is very cool to me that both demos for Echo Stasis and Mothered are both completely free and optional chapters that both add to the experience greatly for those who are devoted enough fans to keep playing, and then reward you again while you're playing them by being much more in-depth and complete feeling than most demos you see for games that are just bare-bones versions of the first level as a proof of concept. There's nothing here that isn't important, or is just filler material, and that's an astounding quality to a modern title, when most games seem obsessed with keeping you playing but can't come up with a decent reason why. That's not to say it is without faults. There are many ways to soft-lock yourself out of getting to an ending due to weird interactions and sequencing with objects that create odd visual states and overlays, like you've been seeing for 2.5 games now. I'm not upset at the game for this. You can start over quickly enough without losing much real time. When you do reach the alternate ending into this demo, you're treated to a lot of hints and information about the next title in the series. There is also a very strange moment in the demo where you're told almost outright that you're currently in something called a hyperreality engine, and that none of this is real but projections of memories being replayed. Okay, that's one tiny piece of clarity that in turn adds so many more questions. We're going to end talking about Mothered Home for now, but I thoroughly encourage you to play it. The game implies that this cycle we're watching play out has gone on hundreds of times. At some point, whether consciously or not, Leona realizes inwardly that things are not right the moment she steps back into this cycle, and hunts for her chance to break free. I don't want to imagine how many times she's gone through this, but it had to end eventually. Only, how it ends isn't at all what I was really expecting, having played this ending right after finishing the first run and before the demo. Everything plays the exact same up until Wednesday, when you're taken to the orchard to pick apples. Much to my horror, you have to actually pick those apples again, which is a process. Only this time, instead of returning them to Mother, you leave the orchard, taking your apples with you. Back at the house, you approach Father's record player, and for some reason, you're finally able to touch it. Effectively, you've broken free from the path that you've walked down so many times before. It is exciting and strange that the alternate ending happens so early in the game, but the scene in the orchard is the part of the story that ties together these many pathways, and it is so immensely important to the overall narrative. When you interact with the record player, the downstairs door finally opens. We see it isn't a bathroom, but a deep basement that keeps descending below the entire property. Deviating from this critical path causes us to keep pausing, locked in a fight with ourselves as the week advances all the way through to Sunday night. Realizing we've never survived this long before in our weekly cycle, we press onward, the critical path now completely abandoned, and our core objective becomes finding out about ourselves. The most interesting part of this ending comes from the detailed memory leaks that we find scattered around the final room of the basement once we've escaped from the family above. What we find is the father's memories, which we can interact with to get a more detailed backstory to what's been going on in the series thus far. The backstory we're given here is actually key to understanding Father's character and his motivations. He's actually the creator of the original Enigma machines, which he refers to as angels. This word will come up a ton in the next game. The core that's installed inside of us is Leona's core, taken from her human body while she was lying in a terminal state in the hospital. The core that's installed inside of us is Leona's core, taken from her human body while she was lying in a terminal state in the hospital. Did this kill Leona? Did her mother even know?
Experimenting on these angels has to be done in complete secrecy, and so his life becomes a balancing act of lying to his employers who control his life and constantly having to manipulate his wife with promises of a return to normalcy if she can just bear this madness and hope for another week. He claims that each attempt has been retired just before reaching full contamination, and trying to claim that what he's been doing to this android girl falls just short of murder, which he can deal with as long as it never goes to 100% contamination. After reading these entries, we use the ashes of our past selves to ascend to the exit and find ourselves back in front of the house. We are now completely contaminated. We're told that we're not wanted inside anymore, but there's a car waiting out front for us. Father, who seems confused as to why we're out here before quickly realizing what's happened. This angel has finally slipped her leash. He seems content with this knowledge, and we pile into the family car for another trip. During this trip, he decides that we need a name now that we're our own entity, and the game cuts off just before he decides to tell us that our name is...
Thank you for watching part 1 of the Enigma Studios analysis that I'm attempting here. This project is much larger than I thought it was going to be, and it's taken up much more of my brain space and time than intended, but that just means that I've gotten a hold of something really worth thinking about. I hope that you don't take this as an endings explained or an objective type look at the trilogy, and you really should experience it, for yourself if you are able to do so. If you enjoyed this video, I won't often ask to do this type of thing, but if you would do the YouTube stuff of like liking and subscribing or sharing it around, then that would be very cool. I'm trying to grow the channel to 50 subscribers, and I could use a lot of help doing that. So I will not have this outro part, by the way, in the full video re-upload when I put all of this together when it's finally done. Thank you, though, so much again for watching this. It really means the world to me. All right, have a good one.